Graham, thank you very much for this invitation. Graham very kindly suggested that I was an historian, which I feel it's a bit fraudulent to call me that in the company of such august people as Tom Holland. I think I should call myself a journo-historian, because I'm a journalist who's delved a bit into history, partly looking at the monarchy and the British monarchy and religion. And as Graham said, I was the editor of the Tablet, which probably quite a few of you in this room know is a Catholic publication. So you have some idea of where I'm coming from. Now, Tom and Graham's conversation looked at the Church of England and the monarchy and the coronation, and I'm going to focus a little bit on that, and I'm partly going to do that by quoting to you some words from the king and from his mother, because I think their words tell us a lot about where the monarch, the supreme governor of the Church of England, has got to, and how Elizabeth II and her heir Charles III have somewhat reinvented what the Church of England is and what their role is. So when the king spoke to the nation after his mother's death, so this was addressing us through television the night after she died, and he said the role and duties of monarchy remain as does the sovereign's particular relationship and responsibility towards the Church of England, the church in which my own faith is so deeply rooted. And he went on, in that faith and the values it inspires, I've been brought up to cherish a sense of duty to others and to hold in the greatest respect the precious traditions, freedoms and responsibilities of our unique history and our system of parliamentary government. As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself throughout the remaining time God grants me to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And his Protestant role was also, of course, evident at the Accession Council a few days later when he swore to uphold the Protestant religion in Scotland. So he put the Church of England and God front and centre of what his role was going to be. But he also said during that address to the nation, in the course of the last 70 years, we've seen our society become one of many cultures and many faiths, acknowledging how things have changed. Now, I was really interested in what he had to say to faith leaders just days after his accession, and also intrigued by the fact that so much of what we saw in the days after Elizabeth II had died had been planned for a very long time, but apparently the faith reception which he invited faith leaders, other Christian denominations and leaders of other faiths, to shortly after Elizabeth II had died, had not been planned in advance, and this was an add-on that he instigated. I've been told by people it was definitely his idea. And while he was there, he said to those gathered, I am a committed Anglican Christian, and at my coronation I will take an oath relating to the settlement of the Church of England. At my accession, I've already solemnly given, as has every sovereign over the last 300 years, an oath which pledges to maintain and preserve the Protestant faith in Scotland. And then he went on, I've always thought of Britain as a community of communities. That has led me to understand that the sovereign has an additional duty, less formally recognised, but to be no less diligently discharged. It is the duty to protect the diversity of our country, including by protecting the space for faith itself and its practice through the religions, cultures, traditions and beliefs to which our hearts and minds direct us as individuals. Then he said, the beliefs that flourish in and contribute to our richly diverse society can only thrive through a clear collective commitment to those vital principles of freedom of conscience, generosity and spirit and care for others, which are to me the essence of our nationhood. I am determined as king to preserve and promote those principles across all communities and for all beliefs with all my heart. Now, I think that's a bit of a rewriting of what the Church of England was about when it was founded, but it certainly chimed with what his mother had said at the start of her Diamond Jubilee in 2012, when she said of the Church of England, its duty is not to defend Anglicanism to the exclusion of other religions. The Church has a duty to protect the free practice of all faiths in this country. So this seems to me that we've had a rewriting of the monarch's role. This is a contemporary legitimacy, if you like. And the new king clearly thinks of himself in the role of convener. And before his illness, he brought about several faith gatherings. Now, the late Queen, I was told by a senior cleric who knew her very well, did not spend her time thinking of herself as being a Protestant or even as an Anglican. How she perceived herself was being a Christian above all. And in a more secular age, I think that's something that people would applaud. However, the late Queen was very adept at consolidating relationships with certainly other Christian denominations, and I was very aware, as editor of the Tablet, how highly regarded she was in Rome, in the Vatican. She probably met more popes than any other person in history. And one of the people I spoke to when I was writing a book about the British and the papacy described her as the last Christian monarch. That was the regard they had for her. I don't know what the King of Spain would have thought about that. And I don't know how they view the current king. Now, as a Catholic, when I look at the coronation, I find it rather curious because it's clearly a service where, as Graham was mentioning earlier, we hear vows about upholding the Protestant religion. But to people like me watching it, it seems to be, excuse me, very much a Catholic mass. In many ways, it's like an ordination mass. And it seems in many ways to me surprising that nobody ever reformed it to actually make it more Protestant than it is. To me it seemed to rather than focus on Scripture, although we did hear Scripture, and could there ever have been a greater expression of diversity than hearing our Hindu Prime Minister read St. Paul? The coronation really focuses, it seems to me, on the sacraments. And this time, our 21st century coronation had a lot of instances of Catholicism, evidence of the growing friendship with the Roman Catholic Church within it. Perhaps the greatest example of that was the cross, which came in before the king as part of his procession. The king, who would then go on to vow to uphold the Protestant religion, he came in behind a cross in which had been inserted relics of the true cross given by Pope Francis. A strange, diverse moment there. Now, one thing that did strike me about the coronation is that because it hadn't been reformed to a greater degree since early times, it actually works now very well for a visual age. It's a feast for the senses, and that works tremendously well for television and social media of our time. But we have to ask, is it more than that feast for the senses? Is it more than pomp, more than ceremony? I think to believers of certainly of different Christian denominations and other believers of different faiths, it makes sense. It points as a signpost to something greater than ourselves. But does it make sense to non-believers? And certainly without belief, ritual can be empty. If you're not a fan, the behaviour of football fans looks possibly anthropologically interesting, but it doesn't have any meaning. And I think Finding a way to communicate meaning to those who aren't believers will be the greatest challenge of the next coronation. And in that sense, perhaps the Church of England does have to think very seriously right now, as does the current Prince of Wales, about what the next coronation might be about. I think a moment that showed how it can work was when there was mention of service. That didn't used to have to be articulated, but that came through, I think, as a message that would really speak to others in society. And at the end of the day, even if the spiritual message is rejected, it is at least your message. And I far rather prefer that than you fill your cathedrals, your Anglican cathedrals, with helter-skelters and dinosaurs.